It is early morning, June 4th, 1942. The Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly beneath a pale sky. Aboard the Japanese aircraft carrier Akagi, Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, Air Group leader of the Imperial Japanese Navy, stands on the flight deck. The wind is sharp. The sea is calm. Everything appears under control. Fuchida is no unknown officer. 6 months earlier, he led the first wave over Pearl Harbor. That success still echoes through the ranks. But today feels different. Today the enemy is expected yet unseen. Below deck, aircraft are packed tightly in the hangars. Nakajima B, 5N torpedo bombers, Achi D-3A dive bombers. Fuel lines snake across metal floors. Bombs and torpedoes lie exposed. At 4:30 hours, the first strike launches toward Midway Atoll. Fuchida remains aboard Akagi, injured from earlier operations, but his authority over air decisions is absolute. He listens. He waits. At 7:15, a message arrives from the strike leader. Midway is not neutralized. Another attack is required. This moment, this single report forces a decision. Admiral Kiichi Nagamo, Carrier Force Commander, turns to his staff. The carriers still hold a reserve strike armed with torpedoes, meant for enemy ships. No American fleet has yet been confirmed. But Midway still stands. Nagamo orders the aircraft below deck to be rearmed with bombs for a second land strike. The order ripples through the carrier like a quiet shockwave. Torpedoes are rolled aside. Bombs are brought forward. Fueling resumes. Aircraft remain crowded and vulnerable. Minutes later, another report cuts through the tension. American ships sighted. The words land heavy. Now everything changes. Nagamo hesitates, then reverses the order. The aircraft must be rearmed again. Bombs off. Torpedoes back on. This back-and-forth decision traps Japan's air power in its most fragile state. Hangars fill with fueled aircraft. Explosives lie exposed. No planes are airborne to protect the fleet. Fuchida watches this unfold. He understands the danger. Carriers live or die by timing. By minutes, above the task force, the sky is deceptively empty. But somewhere beyond the clouds, American aircraft are already inbound. On Akagi, engines idle. Deck crews wait for the next command. Seconds stretch into minutes. No sirens yet. No warning. Only the low hum of machinery and the growing sense that something is terribly wrong. And then, far above the fleet, unseen shapes break through the clouds. The first warning comes too late. At 9:18 hours, Japanese lookouts finally spot American aircraft, but they are not what Nagamo expects. They fly low, slow, uncoordinated. Torpedo bombers, Douglas TBD Devastators skim the ocean surface, engines straining, formations broken by distance and fear. They belong to Torpedo Squadron 8, launched from the USS Hornet. On Akagi, anti-aircraft guns erupt. Zero fighters dive from above, cutting through the American planes with ruthless efficiency. One by one, the torpedo bombers fall. Explosions on the water. Wreckage trailing smoke. No hits scored. To the Japanese command staff, it looks like confirmation. The Americans are desperate, disorganized. Their attack seems poorly executed. Fuchida does not share that confidence. He watches the sky carefully. He knows this pattern. Low-level attacks force fighters down. They pull combat air patrol away from altitude. And altitude is where carriers truly die. As the last devastator crashes into the sea, the Japanese fighters remain low fuel burning, ammunition depleted. For a brief moment, the sky above the fleet is empty. Inside Akagi's hangars, chaos continues under discipline. Aircraft are still being rearmed. Torpedoes hang beneath wings. Bombs remain stacked nearby, never fully cleared. Fuel vapors thicken the air. Then at 10-20 hours, the world shatters. From high altitude, out of the sun, SBD dauntless dive bombers scream downward. They belong to VB-6 and VS-6, launched from USS Enterprise. No warning sirens, no time to react. The first bomb strikes Akagi near the midship elevator. It punches through the flight deck and detonates in the hangar. The explosion ignites fueled aircraft instantly. Fire rolls through the enclosed space like a living thing. Bombs detonate. Torpedoes cook off. Men are vaporized where they stand. A second bomb hits moments later. Steel twists. Smoke erupts upward. The carrier lurches. Fuchida is thrown to the deck. When he rises, visibility is gone. Black smoke pours through corridors. Heat becomes unbearable. Orders cannot be heard. Damage control teams rush forward, but the fires are already beyond control. Water mains are ruptured. Firefighting foam runs dry. Above, more bombs fall not only on Akagi, but across the formation. Kaga, Soryu, each is struck with devastating precision. What took years to build is destroyed in minutes. Najimo's command staff scrambles to relocate as smoke fills the bridge. Communications collapse. Flight operations are impossible. The proud flagship of the Pearl Harbor attack is now a burning wreck. Fuchida looks across the deck. Aircraft once symbols of power are melting into the steel beneath them. The decision made hours earlier now reveals its cost. The carriers were caught armed, fueled, and defenseless. As the fires spread uncontrollably, a final realization sets in. Japan's carrier, forced the heart of its naval air, power has been mortally wounded. And still, the battle is not over. Smoke hangs over the sea like a low ceiling. By late morning, Akagi is no longer a fighting ship. Flames consume the hangar decks. Explosions echo deep inside the hull. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida moves through choking corridors, guiding wounded men toward the edges of the deck where the air is barely breathable. Orders arrive quietly. The flagship must be abandoned. Fuchida steps off Akagi and onto a destroyer alongside. From there, he watches the carrier burn, the same deck where victory once felt inevitable. Across the formation, the situation is just as grim. Kaga is ablaze from bow to stern. Soryu is crippled, fires spreading unchecked. Only one Japanese carrier remains operational. Hiryu, a few miles away, Admiral Taman Yamaguchi, refuses to withdraw. He knows the situation is desperate, but doctrine and pride leave no room for retreat. On Hiryu, flight decks are cleared with urgency. Dive bombers are armed. Pilots briefed in minutes. This is no longer a planned operation. It is a counterpunch thrown in rage and calculation. At approximately 10:50 hours, Hiryu launches its first strike. Aichi D-3, a dive bomber's climb into the smoke-filled sky. American carriers are somewhere to the east, their exact positions uncertain. Time is running out. Fuchida listens to reports from afar. He cannot fly. He cannot command. He can only understand what is happening. The Japanese aircrew finds the enemy. At 12:20 hours, dive bombers break through clouds over USS Yorktown. Bombs fall. One strikes near the island structure. Another penetrates the flight deck. Explosions roar through the carrier's interior. Yorktown slows. Smoke pours upward. To Japanese observers, she appears mortally wounded. Cheers erupt briefly aboard Hiryu, but they are premature. Damage control on Yorktown is swift and brutal. Fire parties flood compartments. Power is rerouted. Within an hour, the carrier is moving again. The illusion of victory fades quickly. Still, Yamaguchi orders a second strike, this time with torpedo bombers. At 14:30 hours, the second wave attacks. 2 torpedoes slam into Yorktown's port side. The carrier shudders and finally stops dead in the water. Again, Japanese pilots believe they have delivered the killing blow. Fuchida knows better. He understands now that the American carriers are resilient and that Hiryu has revealed herself. High above, American scouts are already tracking the source of the counterattack. The sky begins to fill once more. As afternoon light slants across the ocean, American dive bombers line up in the distance, their noses tilting downward. On Hiryu, alarms sound. Anti-aircraft guns begin to fire. Admiral Yamaguchi remains on the bridge. The last Japanese carrier of the strike force is about to face the same fate as the others. And this time, there will be no escape. The attack on Hiryu begins from altitude. Late afternoon, June 4th, 1942. The sun hangs low, turning smoke into dark pillars that mark each burning carrier. American SBD Dauntless dive bombers from USS Enterprise and USS Yorktown roll over almost simultaneously. On Hiryu, lookouts shout warnings. Gunners track shadows descending from the glare. Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi does not flinch. He remains on the bridge, eyes fixed forward, knowing exactly what this means. The first bomb strikes near the forward elevator. It punches through the flight deck and detonates among armed aircraft. Flame erupts instantly. A second bomb hits amidships. A third follows seconds later. Explosions chain together as fuel and munitions ignite. Aircraft flip, burn, and collapse into twisted wreckage. In moments, Hiryu becomes an inferno. Anti-aircraft fire falls silent, not from lack of will, but from heat and smoke choking the gun crews. Damage control teams fight forward, but the fires cannot be contained. Water pressure drops. Communications fail. From a distance, Mitsuo Fuchida watches the last carrier die. He understands with brutal clarity. The battle is lost. Still, Hiryu does not sink immediately. Through the evening, she drifts, burning. Yamaguchi refuses evacuation. So does Captain Tomio Kaku. Both men choose to remain aboard. Their decision is quiet, formal, final. At nightfall, crewmen are ordered off the ship. Boats pull away slowly, carrying wounded and exhausted survivors. By early morning, June 5th, Japanese destroyers receive the final order. Here you must be scuttled. Torpedoes strike the burning hull. The carrier shudders one last time, then slips beneath the surface of the Pacific. 4 fleet carriers lost in one day. Akaki, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, this is not just a tactical defeat. It is an irreversible fracture. Fuchida stands on deck as the sea closes over the last silhouette. He knows the truth, even if others do not yet speak it aloud. Japan's offensive air power, carefully trained, irreplaceable, has been shattered. Experienced pilots are gone. Veteran deck crews lost. Aircraft factories cannot replace skill, instinct, or timing. All of it traces back to a single morning decision: to rearm on deck, to hesitate, to believe the enemy would not arrive first. But the war does not pause for reflection. American carriers still patrol the horizon. Submarines prowl the darkness. As the surviving Japanese ships turn west, retreating toward home, the sense of triumph that once fueled the fleet is gone. What remains is silence, and the realization that the balance of air power in the Pacific has shifted forever. Yet for Japan, this truth will not be fully accepted, not yet. Because far from the smoke of Midway, High Command still believes recovery is possible. And that belief will demand more pilots, more aircraft, and more sacrifices. The morning after Midway feels unnaturally quiet. June 5, 1942. The sea is calm again, as if the violence of the previous day never happened. But beneath the surface, wreckage drifts. Oil spreads in dark, uneven patterns. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida remains aboard a destroyer of the retreating Japanese force. He has slept little. The images of burning decks and falling aircraft do not fade with daylight. Reports arrive piece by piece. Casualty numbers, aircraft losses, pilot rosters with too many names crossed out. The scale becomes undeniable. Japan has lost 4 fleet carriers and more than 300 aircraft in 2 days. But the greater loss is invisible. The men who cannot be replaced. Fuchida knows this better than most. Carrier aviation is not built quickly. It takes years to train a deck crew that can launch and recover aircraft in darkness and storms under fire. It takes even longer to produce pilots capable of coordinating strikes across open ocean. Those men now lie at the bottom of the Pacific. High Command orders a continued retreat. The remaining surface ships turn west, away from Midway, away from the American carriers still searching for targets. Later that day, American aircraft locate the damaged heavy cruiser Mikuma, part of Vice Admiral Nobutake Kondo's force. Dive bombers attack repeatedly. Mikuma is hit. Fires rage. She sinks on June 6th. This is not part of the carrier battle, but it underscores the new reality. Japanese air cover is gone. Every ship is exposed. Fuchida receives orders to return to Japan, not as a hero, not as a commander of victory, as a survivor. In Tokyo, the defeat is hidden from the public. Newspapers speak of successful engagements and orderly withdrawals. Losses are minimized. The truth is confined to secure rooms and whispered conversations. But inside the Navy, the consequences begin immediately. Carrier divisions are dissolved. Surviving pilots are reassigned to land bases. Training programs are accelerated but shortened. The standards that once defined Japanese naval aviation begin to erode. Fuchida participates in these discussions. He argues for caution, for realism. His warnings go largely unheard. The Empire needs symbols of strength. Midway cannot be acknowledged as a turning point. And so the decision made on the morning of June 4th continues to echo, not just in lost ships, but in the desperate choices that follow. Young pilots are rushed through training. Flight hours are cut. Experience is replaced with speed. The air arm that once struck Pearl Harbor with precision now struggles to maintain cohesion. Fuchida sees the trajectory clearly. Without carriers, Japan will be forced into defensive war. Without trained pilots, that war will be unwinnable. But the orders keep coming. More aircraft must fly. More men must take to the skies. As summer advances, the Pacific War enters a new phase, longer, harsher, and more unforgiving. And for Japan's Naval Air Force,